viewable from the concourse at Truist Park behind sections 425 and 325. Just beyond the stadium, at 10.5 miles away, lies the Monadnock, that is Kenesaw Mountain. Boasting a modest 1,808 feet above sea level, is considered the highest point in metropolitan Atlanta, and is loaded with history from the Hadeen Eon to Civil War, which is actually as well how the history of Kenesaw Mountain ties into the history of Major League Baseball. Before we get into the history of Kenesaw Mountain and its connection to Major League Baseball, of course, with the first Major League Baseball commissioner being named after it, Kenesaw Mountain Landis. First, take a look here. The beautiful sights of Kenesaw Mountain. Nice scenery here close Atlanta. Of course, Blue Ridge Mountain's not far away. The Kenesaw Mountain is not a part of that mountain range aforementioned. It is a Monadnock, standalone mountain here. And adjacent to it is Little Kennesaw and Pigeon Hill. It is quite a physical 1 mile to the top of Kenesaw Mountain, 1 mile straight up to that 1,808 foot summit. There's side trails all along it, different ways to cut out and carve out a nice day hiking. If you want to take a short hike, you can go up and down the mountain. As well, there's biking areas, roads. If you want to do the full Monty, it's 16.2 miles from Visitor Center to Cobb Farm and back. Not a ton of elevation, though. So here's Kenesaw Mountain Landis and the history of that. The first commissioner of Major League Baseball, Kenesaw Mountain Landis, was fathered by a man named Abraham Landis, who served as an assistant surgeon with the 35th Ohio Volunteer Infantry Regiment during the American Civil War at the Battle of Kenesaw Mountain on that fateful day of June 27th, when Abraham was severely wounded when a ricocheting cannonball struck his left leg below the knee, shattering it horribly. As a medical man himself, he likely understood the gravity of his injury. The wound required extensive hospital recovery and ended his military service, leading to his honorable discharge on September 27, 1864. But it did not prevent him from giving birth to or fathering Kenesaw Mountain Landis. His name is spelled with one N in Kennesaw. It was an interchangeable spelling at the time. It has since been formatted to the current spelling of Kennesaw with two N's. He was born on November 20th, 1866 in Millville, Ohio, where he had a long career in law, running his own corporate law practice in Chicago, as well as serving as a personal secretary to Walter Q. Grisham, Secretary of State under Grover Cleveland. It was these successes that landed Kenesaw Mountain Landis the job of Judge of the United States District Court for the Northern District of Illinois. He served in this position from 1905 to 1920 and overlaps with when he became Commissioner of Major League Baseball in 1920. His first prominent order of duty and primary reason for being appointed to the Commissioner of Baseball had to do with the scandal around the 1919 White Sox, who intentionally threw the 1919 World Series in exchange for money from gamblers, involved at least 8 players accused, including the legend Shoeless Joe Jackson. Gambling at the time, Major League Baseball was a widespread problem, and the 1919 World Series was a breaking point for the league and Major League Baseball. Kenesaw Mountain was voted to be appointed by the 8 Major League Baseball owners at the time to be a commissioner, a small committee in November 2020, with the owners stating they wanted an iron fist ruling over the game, and with Landis, they got that, as Landis shortly stated he would as well. The day after the Black Sox, nicknamed the team from the 1919 World Series who threw the series, they were found not guilty in a trial by jury on August 2nd, 1921. The day after, on August 3rd, Kenesaw Mountain Landis issued a statement banning the 8 accused White Sox players, including Shoeless Joe Jackson, from the game of baseball for life. Kenesaw Mountain Landis issued this statement. Regardless of the verdict of juries, no player that throws a ball game, no player that undertakes or promises to throw a ball game, no player that sits in a conference room with a bunch of crooked players and gamblers where they ways and means of throwing ball games are planned and discussed, does not promptly tell his club about, will ever play professional baseball. Of course, I don't know any of these men will apply for reinstatement, but if they do, the above are at least a few of the rules that will be enforced. Just keep in mind that, regardless of the verdict of juries, baseball is competent to protect itself against crooks both inside and outside the game. Players from the 1919 White Sox, they attempted to appeal the ban several times, including shortly after when Buck Weaver reached out directly to Commissioner Landis appealing for reinstatement. Shoeless Joe Jackson as well argued innocence, citing his .375 batting average in the series and that he was innocent in accusations. As Landis stated, and the owners of Major League Baseball stated when they appoint him to rule over Major League Baseball with an iron fist, he denied every attempt for reinstatement by those White Sox players. So we've now successfully hiked up Kenesaw Mountain, as we've seen in our pictures and videos. We're now about to start looking towards Little Kenesaw Mountain. Little Kenesaw Mountain is 1,601 feet in elevation. Its elevation is quite a bit further spread out than Big Kenesaw, providing for different workout experience if you're going to hike that area. For that, as many people do daily, locals certainly make it a part of their routine, weekly, monthly, daily routine to visit the mountain, get their exercise in. As you'll even see bikers on the road. Be careful for those cyclists. They go pretty fast on the road around the mountain there. The summit is a highly popular area of Big Kenesaw Mountain. It does have a parking area. You can drive up it when the road is accessible during operational hours. Even during weekdays, you'd see quite a crowd there. A nice sunny day, such as this was in May. Before we end our story on Kenesaw Mountain Landis, enjoy some sights, sounds, and more information here about Kenesaw Mountain and the National Recreation Battlefield area. And here we go. Now we're leaving Big Kenesaw Mountain, about to climb down from Big Kenesaw and make the hike up to Little Kenesaw Mountain. There's history all along the trail, as well nature as well. Have to keep your eyes peeled, sights, sounds, never know what you'll find. And of course, there's certainly very gruesome reminders of the battles that occurred there. There was very fierce fighting for summit Big Kenesaw Mountain, although most of the fighting, some of the heaviest fighting occurred in Pigeon Hill, Chatham Hill regions, and some of the more fieldy areas. You'll see a lot of the trenches there, and even some stains on rocks in certain areas. Before you know it, you're at this road. It splits Big and Little Kenesaw. Aforementioned, watch out for those cyclists. They go pretty fast. Here's how the trail leading up to Little Kenesaw Mountain looks. Aforementioned, it's more of a tempered slope as well. You did not quite climb all the way down from Big Kenesaw Mountain. So a little bit of the elevation is already out of the way already. Back half of Little Kenesaw Mountain from Pigeon Hill, as we're seeing in this shot here, is quite rocky and provides quite a unique workout compared to the Big Kenesaw Mountain. It's a very rocky trail on back half of Little Kenesaw Mountain, as we'll see later in these pictures and videos coming here. But here is Little Kenesaw Mountain as viewed from Pigeon Hill. Enjoy. Our story on Kenesaw Mountain Landis, you have to talk a little bit about the battle in which his father, Abraham Landis, was injured in. The Battle of Kenesaw Mountain primarily fought on June 27, 1864, during the American Civil War, pivotal movement in the Atlanta campaign occurring in northwest Georgia near present-day Kenesaw Mountain National Battlefield Park in Cobb County, about 25 miles from downtown Atlanta. Union forces, Major General William T. Sherman, with about 100,000 Union troops, confronted Confederate forces led by General Joseph E. Johnson, commanding about 63,000 Confederate troops along a fortified line centered on Kenesaw Mountain. The main Union assault targeted the Confederate positions around the mountain's southern slopes, particularly near Pigeon Hill and Chatham Hill. Now, key areas, National Battlefield Park. So if you want to walk a bit of a historic hike and a little bit such as the Union did in their battle, you'd park at Chatham Hill and then walk and do the hike to Big Kenesaw, such as Union forces did back in 1864. Reserve site. General Sherman's failed frontal assault resulted nearly 3,000 Union casualties compared to 1,000 Confederate losses, but subsequent flanking maneuvers forced Johnson's retreat toward Atlanta by early July. During the Battle of Kenesaw Mountain on June 27th, the Union forces under General William T. Sherman launched a direct assault on Confederate fortifications along Big Kenesaw and surrounding ridges, a departure from Sherman's typical flanking strategy, which he would eventually turn back to and succeed with that. The attack focused on 3 key points along the Confederate line, which stretched along Big Kenesaw, Little Kenesaw, adjacent areas such as Pigeon Hill and Chatham Hill, now part of the Kenesaw Mountain National Battlefield Park as a whole. The main assault on Big Kenesaw came from Sherman deploying 2 columns from frontal attack. The primary assault targeted the southern slopes of Big Kenesaw Mountain, where Confederate General Joseph E. Johnson had positioned well-entrenched troops, including artillery, commanders like Lieutenant William Hardy, as you'll see under signs there along the park, and Union divisions of the Army from the Cumberland, led by General George H. Thomas, advanced uphill against steep terrain and heavy Confederate defenses such as the cannon which Kenesaw Mountain Landis' father, Abraham Landis, was injured with. The rugged slopes of the Pigeon Hill of the Big Kenesaw, combined with Confederate earthworks and artillery, made the assault particularly challenging, resulting heavy Union casualties and little progress. Along Pigeon Hill, south of Big Kenesaw Mountain, Union troops from the Army, Tennessee, under General James E. McPherson, attacked Confederate forces in Pigeon Hill, a rocky outcrop near Little Kenesaw, terrain covered with dense underbrush and boulders, such as we see pictured earlier. Chatham Hill and Dead Angles, where some of the most fierce fighting occurred, where Union troops from the Army of the Cumberland, specifically under Brigadier General John Newton's division and Colonel Daniel McCook's brigade, assaulted a fortified Confederate salient known as the Dead Angle. Confederate defenders, primarily under General Benjamin F. Cheatham division, held a strong position with breastworks and clear fields of fire. Union soldiers faced devastating volleys and artillery barrages, suffering heavy casualties. McCook himself was mortally wounded despite breaching from some defenses. The Union attack stalled, unable to overturn the intense Confederate positions. Union's frontal assault on Big Kenesaw and its associated positions was largely unsuccessful due to Confederate fortifications, difficulty of defense tactics. Sherman's forces suffered approximately 3,000 casualties compared to Confederates' 1,000. Recognizing futility of further direct assaults, Sherman reverted to his flanking strategy, maneuvering around Johnson's left flank towards Marietta, forcing the Confederates to withdraw towards Atlanta by early July. Attack on Big Kenesaw Mountain highlighted the challenges of assaulting entrenched positions and shaped Sherman's subsequent campaign tactics. After getting through the rocky western back half of the Little Kenesaw Mountain Trail, you then face a slight upward incline, getting up to Pigeon Hill, which is 1,240 feet itself. The Atlanta Piedmont sits around 600 to 700 feet, so these elevations are taken with a little bit of grain of salt here. But Pigeon Hill is one of the nicer areas aesthetically. There are a lot of nice rocks. Of course, this is where some of the most fierce fighting of the entire campaign occurred, and there's gruesome reminders along everywhere of some of the fighting that occurred in this area. But it is one of the most beautiful areas of the park. You see downtown Atlanta on a clear day and fall day, the leaves start to fall. This is earlier in the spring when there's not quite so many leaves. You can see the other mountain ridges from the top of Pigeon Hill very easily. It reminds me a little bit Boundary Waters in Minnesota, a lot of exposed rocks, rocky areas. depending on how you cut out your day, this could be towards the end of your day. You're coming down Pigeon Hill and coming into the Pigeon Hill parking lot area as pictured here. But for those serious hikers, you can continue on, do the full 16.2 mile trek. From here on out, it's mostly historic related. There's not a ton of nature scenery. There are some nice fields, of course, the battlefields where those very fierce battles occurred. There's no ball playing, no football playing, no horseplay on those battlefields, as they like to keep a reverent, respectful vibe there at the park. But as you walk along there towards the Lincoln Monument and further on to Cobb Farm, the nature all along, have to keep your eyes peeled as well. I see some ruins of previously existing buildings, including old churches, as about to picture here. Keep your eyes peeled for nature aforementioned. There's some kind of beehive looking thing up in a tree. Maybe just some giant knot on a tree. Either way, pretty interesting. Maybe it's hit by a cannonball. Probably not. As well, you can see trenches. There's signs all along the trail to give you information, historical information. Of course, with smartphones now, you can look it up, see it instantly. Aforementioned, keep your eyes peeled for nature, as we see here. You see many wild deer along the way. Never get close enough to picture very easily unless you have great zoom. But here's a nice video of a deer here. Been to the park many times, and here I captured a moment, not sure if I've seen before. Here is a wild tractor cutting the grass. I guess they gotta cut the grass sometime. Not sure if I've ever seen them do it. But there it is. They do it with a tractor. It drives between the trails. If you hear it, if you see it, watch out. The disappointment and impact on the band players was well documented. Some very emotionally compelling cases for some players, including Shoeless Joe Jackson. Although it was as well documented that Kenesaw Mountain Landis' severance of those 8 accused White Sox players of throwing the 1919 World Series reinstated the public's trust into Major League Baseball and the game of baseball, which helped grow it into the game it is today. Kenesaw Mountain Landis would serve as Major League Baseball commissioner until his death in 1944. 81 years after the passing of Kenesaw Mountain Landis, current commissioner of Major League Baseball, Rob Manfred, has, as a part of a broader action, removed deceased players from the permanently ineligible list, which effectively reinstates the 1919 White Sox and shoeless Joe Jackson. Shoeless Joe Jackson is now eligible to be inducted to Major League Baseball's Hall of Fame. It will be interesting to see in the near future if they get in, if shoeless Joe Jackson gets in, Pete Rose gets in, all those kinds of discussion, as all deceased players who were on the permanently ineligible list are now eligible again. As you make your way to Cobb Farm, you'll pass by the Lincoln Monument. Of course, plenty of cannons all along the trail. The cannons on top of Big Kennesaw, Little Kennesaw, Pigeon Hill, and cannons everywhere. Cannon near Lincoln Monument as well. So here ends our day at the Kenesaw Mountain National Battlefield Recreation Area. A nice area to visit. Very scenic areas. Of course, fields like this, sobering reminder of gruesome battles that occurred there, of course, during the Civil War. Very cool to tie in the history of Major League Baseball and man named after it, Kenesaw Mountain Landis, named after his mother, Mary, fathered by Abraham Landis, who battled for Ohio as a surgeon and had his leg broken in the battle. This area is just a short drive from Truist Park, and of course is just beyond the stadium.